I'm Martin Wallace.
I'm Darren McCarthy.
I'm Dan Fury.
And this is The Fundamentals.
What the heck are we talking about?
Today we are talking about GPS.
Oh boy.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, had no idea how it worked.
No idea.
At all.
Just a very basic concept.
I knew what the things
satellites.
were. Yeah, there
the
was
satellites.
stuff and it's happening.
It's the stuff you can't see. It's
Yeah.
beaming around all the time. I just need it.
Yeah. And you have it.
And I have it. And I use it all the time.
You know what it was like before GPS?
I can barely remember.
Maps.
You just got lost all the time. You had to use landmarks when you went around. You had to know,
Yeah.
oh, I know that place. That means I'm somewhere roughly around here.
I'm getting close.
Asking for directions from strangers.
Oh, God, I can't do it.
See, in my adult life, don't believe I've ever had to do that.
Why would you?
No,
I've been pretty late to the smartphone game, so up until about 36 hours ago, I was desperately lost and just begging people to tell me where I lived.
In the darkness.
In the darkness.
I have no idea.
I said, "Do you know where I live? Can I come home with you?
Is this home?
Is this home? How'd you get here?
How did you get here? Where are you going?
Where are you going? Can I go with you?" But I thought about that. Notwithstanding like the smartphone thing, but
yeah,
pretty rare that in my adult life I've had to ask for directions.
Since I had GPS on my phone.
Yeah.
Never look back.
No.
Always looking forward.
Yeah.
There's nowhere
Keep your eyes on the road. Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, but that's something I thought about that. That's kind of changed. Maybe because asking for directions, I think, was one of the few times it was kind of okay to talk to a stranger
and start that conversation
in general without any other agenda.
Right.
It's not like a flirtatious thing, or maybe it is. Maybe people, I know exactly where that store is.
Well, it's an in and out conversation.
Yeah.
So how it starts, and once you tell me, then I'm going to be on my way, and we'll never speak to each other again.
And I feel it too. If you're being asked, your first reaction is like, "What the hell are you? Why are you talking to me?"
Nowadays,
but then it's like, "Hey, do you know where?" And then as soon as they say that, I go like, "Oh, you're not a murderer.
Yeah.
You're not crazy. I'll tell you where that is."
You're just looking for some cigarettes.
Looking for some smoots.
Looking for a bar. Looking for this.
It is funny
store.
when somebody passes me on the street and asks me where something is. It's kind of weird that you don't know
how to use your phone.
How to figure that out. And what you're asking, I probably couldn't give you very accurate directions just off the top of my head. I'd probably have to look it up. Where do we start? I'm sure GPS has been around long before we were using it.
Yes.
In our society.
Not long before.
Not as long as you think, actually.
Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Surprisingly. I feel like there's a couple real quick basics that we have to go through before we get into the GPS and how it works.
Sure.
Yeah.
For one, we got to talk about satellites.
Yeah.
Really, because it is a network of satellites. And so what it's doing specifically, now that they're up there, won't make quite as much sense until you get into satellites. Satellites are kind of fun. The first person to think about a satellite was a thought experiment by Isaac Newton.
Really?
Right? That has a lot to do with gravity, orbit, the whole thing. So before that, getting things out into space wasn't anybody's, they were astronomers at the time, sure, but it was all speculation at that point. People
the idea of actually launching something.
Yeah, gravity plays a huge role in all of physics and everything. So it was called the Cannonball Thought Experiment, and he had it in 1729. I've drawn a little illustration of it. It's fairly simple.
Nice.
So the idea is, if you were to go up to a mountaintop, right, and put a cannon on top of it, shoot a cannon off, it's going to go a little while, and then gravity's going to pull it down to the earth. So if you put a little bit more gunpowder in there, fire it off a little bit harder and faster, it'll still go, farther, but still fall to the earth. But theoretically, if you were to shoot one fast enough and hard enough, it would go along with the curve of the earth, and when it started to fall, would fall along with it and never hit the ground.
Right.
Right? So that's the first time anybody's ever thought of orbit, as far as I know.
Man.
So, and it is kind of a cool little thought experiment because when you think about things in space, it's really hard to visualize what's going on. When you think about orbit, you think about a thing floating around with the planet, right? And sometimes it's going faster, sometimes it's going whatever, but you think this thing's just going in a straight line or whatever. What's actually happening out there is it's falling constantly.
Yep.
It's just falling at the perfect rate to keep it exactly where it needs to be, and we can calculate, do we want to keep a satellite in one position all the time? We can make it go fast or slow enough and get it to a high enough altitude where it just stays along with the planet as it falls. Or we can shoot one off that goes around the planet twice in a day. But it's always in that little position, right? It's always just falling constantly with...
It stays at the same altitude off the surface of the Earth, right?
Yeah. I just thought, that's a really fun thought experiment.
Also, that's a thought experiment.
It's a thought experiment.
Think about that.
He had a thought that...
had never existed.
Yeah, and 300 and something years later, a little bit less, here we are talking about a thought he had. It wasn't a paper.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing. He had a thought.
The only thing he needed
Think about
was
this.
his brain.
Yeah.
The experiment was between the ears.
He was out in the garden, picking apples.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a thought. I have a thought that we will talk about for at least 200 more years.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Good old Mr. Newton.
But satellites are pretty cool. They've been around since the 60s, roughly, when we were able to do that. October of 1957 was Sputnik. We got that out there. And Sputnik really didn't do anything.
No, Sputnik.
We just got it up there.
Just went beep.
Yeah, Russia. And the second satellite they sent up...
Is Sputnik still out there?
No, I think it crashed.
Yeah, it didn't last very long at all.
We sent it to a farm up north.
Yeah, it's running around with all the other satellites. Happy as could be.
It's old satellites.
Speaking of that, the second satellite to ever go up into space, also set up by Russia, was sent up with a stray dog inside.
Dog, yeah.
Just to see the effects.
Was it Sasha? What was the dog's name?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But they just shot a dog up there to monitor the effects of space on a mammal's body. That poor thing. Yeah, and a stray dog, too. I wonder what that means. Like, right before they took it up, did they go out to the streets and grab a dog and say, or did they have a stray that they took care of for a while, getting it ready?
Some vitamins in there?
I like to think that it's on the launch pad. It's ready to go. Second satellite ever, and some guy's job is to go out into the alley and see if there's a dog around.
Oh, did we get a dog yet? No? Okay, wait 5 minutes, guys.
Yeah.
Think about how pumped your dog is when you come home from the store.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that dog when it got back to Earth.
You think it made it?
Didn't it?
I don't know.
I doubt it.
I think it did.
Really doubt it. Really?
I know there's the monkey.
Yeah. There's been a couple monkeys, I think.
Yeah, all kinds of monkeys. I don't know. This isn't about Sasha.
No.
But satellites are pretty cool. They're also incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
You don't really think about that.
No doubt.
Oh, man, they're expensive.
They last a long time. Or, there's...
Well, they do now.
They do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times things go wrong. I like to think about this, too. But, when you think about shuttles, anytime we send people up into space, I'm always like, oh, man, that's such a big, complicated ordeal trying to get this rocket out into space so we can go to the space station, whatever, resupply them, doing whatever it's got to do. And as complicated as all that has to be, it's also just letting satellites go on its way up at a particular point in orbit. So there's a payload, wow. It's carrying cargo. And it deploys, so that these pilots are not only taking this thing up there, but then they're also
just
shooting
opening
stuff
a door and just kind of kicking it out. Yeah.
I never really thought about how satellites got up there before. I always thought we just shot them up by themselves, but no, they come up on rockets and then.
Huh. There's I think for every pound you send into space, it's something like $1 million per pound.
It's ridiculous.
A kilogram. Yeah. Okay, so at any one moment, anywhere on Earth, there are at least 3 satellites, but almost always 4 satellites that are, quote unquote, visible to where you are on planet Earth.
And that's just GPS satellites.
That's just GPS.
Yeah, there's countless amount of satellites in the air.
Sure.
It's an enormous number with just the ones that has civilians we're allowed to know about. Not to count every...
Wait, doesn't George Clooney have a satellite?
Yeah, I was going to say, we talked about it in one of the podcasts, yeah.
Yeah, he does have a satellite. George Clooney's awesome.
Watching this warlord.
He's awesome.
He's like Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, he kind of is like Bruce
Wayne.
Wayne.
He's fighting crime at night.
He played Bruce Wayne.
He totally did.
So there's an enormous amount of satellites up there that we as civilians don't get to know what they do or why they're up there, or who sent them up, all kinds of stuff. The government
there's more
likes to do
private
that.
satellites like that. There's got to be.
I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some
what
dozens
hoops,
of corporations alone that
hoops you got to go through to get your own satellite space.
Well, yeah, I think there's whole companies that are based around having satellite systems, and that's like Dish Network.
yeah.
They have a system of satellites up in space that's how you get your television.
Do they rent? Like,
No, they have their own.
They have their own.
Yeah.
And cell phone companies, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes those companies go bankrupt and they just sit up there. Just yeah. The amount of space debris, space junk is astronomical. But GPS satellites, there's 30 of them.
There's, I think, 29 or 30. It depends on where.
No, I mean out there total right now.
Yeah, I think right now they're replacing the older versions, so that there's kind of like a crossover. But there's 29 or 30, I think, all the time. That's out of 2,465 satellites currently orbiting the Earth.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
But that's how many the internet's allowed to tell us are up there.
Mm-hmm. Now these things weigh a lot.
Yeah.
You know, you always think of a satellite, it's so tiny in comparison to everything else. You're like, I don't know. You never think about how big they actually are.
How big are they roughly?
They're between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds.
But like size-wise? Like
Oh,
size of a house?
I don't think the
That's
size
like
of
a
a house.
car.
It's like a big car. Yeah, of course they're wide too because of the solar panels. And
Yeah, they're all solar
panels.
powered.
Yeah, so they're really
Wingspan.
wide. Yeah.
So GPS, I don't even know if we mentioned, it stands for Global Positioning System. And that is this network of satellites orbiting the Earth all the time, twice a day. Each satellite goes around the Earth twice a day. And 24 of them are actively used for GPS like systems. And then there's 5 or 6 that are just backup.
Yeah, just in case one goes down.
One goes out, they put another one into service. And they're all solar powered, and they have batteries too, just in case for like a solar eclipse.
Oh,
So like a battery pack. So this works all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And so there's always, no matter where you are on the planet, at least 4 within range of you, within sight. And by sight, it's
sight of a device or something like that.
well, they transmit radio waves. So imagine you put out this big half sphere emitting from you in the center that goes out, and there's always at least 4 that can reach that signal. And quite often it's a lot more than that. Now 4 is just what it takes to make the thing work. And now there's so many, most of the time you're surrounded by 9.
Yeah.
It's all just to calculate for redundancies in the system.
And actually, I think you really need is 3 to find your, like, the spot on a map that you were at. But with 4, you get your altitude as well.
Yeah.
So it creates a 3D image of where you are, not just like a 2D image.
Cool.
Yeah, so 4 is like what you would typically be tapped into.
So it does this by a little mathematical principle called trilateration, right? And I've drawn you a diagram here. Let's see if I can explain this the best that I can. Now this is on a 2D plane. It's way, way easier to conceptualize in a 2D plane. So the basic idea behind this is if you wanted to know where you were and you asked a stranger on the street or anybody, where am I? And they gave you some kind of ambiguous answer like, you're 300 miles away from Salem, right? Well, that doesn't tell you at all where you are because here in the middle of one of these circles, everywhere you look out is 300 miles away from Salem. You could be anywhere in this circle. Now you ask somebody else and they say, oh, you're 50 miles away from Newport, right? You go, oh, that's great. So Newport's here and everywhere around is 50 miles and it crosses over into the other person's range. And so there's 2 spots that you could be. So you have a much better idea of where you are, but it's still a coin flip.
It's one of 2, yeah.
Now you ask a third person, trilateration, where you are, and they give you another distance. There's only one spot where those 3 circles can intersect. That's where you have to be. And that's how GPS is determining where you are.
I see.
Now in 3D, you need 4 spheres because, well, you need 4 circles because it turns into a sphere at that point. So where these are crossing on a 2D plane is actually a huge area. And you could be anywhere on the radius of this sphere, not just in this one little point. The good news is Earth acts as the 4th sphere, right?
Yeah.
Because where it intersects with the spheres is the only place of the 2 that it could be because you're not on the other side of it. You're not out in space. You know that.
Right.
So
I'm pretty sure.
yeah, it's a little bit harder to conceptualize in 3D, but you're looking at 4 spheres that essentially all kind of mesh into each other. And now how GPS is able to do that is a much more complicated story, but that's essentially what it's doing.
Yeah.
That's how it's determining where you are. It's not tracking you. It doesn't have a camera on you. It's not one satellite that's receiving a signal. It's a series of satellites that are receiving these signals, and they're all cross-referencing each other to say you have to be right here. You can't be anywhere else.
Yeah. Now, the way they do this is they're emitting radio frequency, which then gets picked up by your device, your GPS device, whatever it is. And there's a measurement. And here I think I'll mention there's an element called cesium. And cesium is this element that is a really highly active, fast-moving element, and it has a radioactive decay that's predictable down to the 9,192,631,770th of a hertz. So that's the frequency.
It's incredibly precise, and it's so precise that this is now what the second is based on.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Time has nothing to do with movement around the sun anymore or any of that.
Yeah.
It is down to this exact frequency of a cesium atom. And that's why we have a thing called an atomic clock.
Right.
Yeah.
So we get the benefit of having that on all of our devices now
stuff, yeah.
because of GPS. And it's a little known kind of thing. We're more grateful for GPS than just location.
Oh, yeah.
Time.
You don't have to set your phone when daylight saving time.
No, it knows.
And beyond that, every financial transaction, like the stock market, happens based around the cesium standard of atomic clocks, because it's, certainly one full second could drastically change the economic picture of the entire world. So if you're making a transaction in London and then someone else is in Tokyo and someone else is in New York, with this standard, it's literally, exactly the same, as long as you're all
using it
on the surface of the Earth.
Right.
These clocks, the cesium clocks, which is what is utilized in GPS. Another fun little side note is they proved the theories of relativity.
Really?
That's right.
Yeah. So Einstein predicted that objects moving at different speeds, time is relative between those two objects. So when these clocks were first developed, the U.S. Navy, like their Navy Research Academy, something, I forget exactly what it was, they set a few clocks to exactly the same numbers, to sync them all up, put a few of these clocks into some airplanes, had the planes fly around the world for, I think, maybe even a full day. I think
What a fun experiment.
Yeah. And when they came back, the clocks were slightly different. And these clocks are accurate to the ones that are currently in use in the GPS satellites are accurate to a billionth of a second or something. I mean, something just...
It's too precise.
A fraction of a billionth.
You can't even really fathom how precise that is.
How fast that is. But when these clocks came back, they landed, they lined them up next to the clocks that were on the Earth's surface, and they were just slightly different. That was only within 24 hours.
And I think that, if I remember right, the speed and the distance which they are, GPS is actually it's 0.37 seconds ahead or behind.
Yep.
So it had to be accounted for when we sent the things up. Otherwise, they wouldn't have worked at all. Because this plays into how GPS finds out where you are, how it is using this trilateration process. Has absolutely nothing to do with location. It's all about time. Time is what determines where you are. And how it does that is these all have these atomic clocks on them using these cesium atoms. I think they're in a vacuum tube or something. It's super cool.
And it's a metal that is liquid at room temperature, just kind of like mercury. We don't have to talk too much about it, but it's a fun little side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got into the basics of it, and then it just started turning all into physics and chemistry, and I was just like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
I just don't even know what you're talking about anymore.
It's really weird stuff.
It's really cool, though. And these things all cost between $50,000 to $100,000, just the clock.
Wow.
And all the GPS units have one. So just to give you an idea of how expensive these satellites are.
Garmin's got it.
Right. Now, that brings up an interesting point, because our phones, our receivers, do not.
Yeah. You don't have a $50,000 atomic clock.
But we get the added benefit of having atomic time on us all of the time. because with GPS, and we'll get into exactly how it's pinpointing your location in a second because this has something to do with it. It's constantly getting multiple codes from multiple satellites.
Mm-hmm.
And so your phone, without having an atomic clock in it, can adjust the difference between all of those to get precise atomic time. I mean, not quite as precise if it was in there, but like you'd never know the difference.
And that plays into why your GPS, it might not, if you look at the map, it's like, oh, it's off a little bit. But your phone is making the best out of the information that it's getting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's balancing different clocks. And also, the satellites are moving, I think, like 7,000 miles an hour or something. I mean...
like 12,000 miles.
Yeah, they're moving pretty quick.
Yeah.
Try 12, bro.
And I think, and how high are they? They're...
Maybe 12,000 miles is how high up it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was correct when I said it.
I think you might be.
No, I could be totally... oh, man.
Guys, I have a question.
Yeah.
If all of these different types of devices owned by all these different types of companies
right.
have a lot of systematic functions based on GPS, who owns these satellites?
I don't know.
The Navy.
The Navy, oh yeah.
The Navy owns them.
All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is run by the Department of Defense, and it's monitored by the Navy.
This was originally a military project. So the GPS was originally designed, like a lot of technologies are, by the military.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to replace some previous kind of navigation systems.
LORAN.
Yeah, I'm interested in
LORAN's really
what
funny.
was the previous navigation system, and we'll get to that, I hope. But I'm curious if all these different companies and, all these different types of things that are using them have to buy into it somehow? I mean, how can you just use
so
it?
it's a publicly available thing. All these companies do is have a receiver.
Yeah.
This is the same way as you can have a radio that is essentially doing the same thing, getting radio waves from a source that's transmitting it.
Right.
So something like Garmin or whatever is in our phones or whatever, they're just receiving the information, cannot manipulate it whatsoever. They have no control over it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you spend money with a company that has a receiver.
Yeah.
So it's the military that owns it.
It maintains and launches it.
Yeah, they monitor everything. They take care of the whole thing. It was their idea.
Yeah.
And just lucky that we live in a place where it was made public,
Yeah, well, even if it wasn't necessarily made public, I think an engineering private citizen who could build... I mean, it's
probably...
It's like over-the-air TV.
Exactly.
All you need is... TV's free.
You need a receiver.
Yeah,
People have been
brainwashed.
brainwashed. I thought about that quite a bit. I think it's radio frequency. So you just need a receiver that's going to pick up
tap into it.
those. And it's, what is it? Low energy, high frequency? Or is it the other way around? I forget.
That sounds right.
I think it's low energy, high frequency. So as long as you have a receiver that can pick up these signals, you have GPS. And then some way to, extrapolate what that information's telling you.
So what were these previous navigation systems? What
I
was
think
based on?
We'll get into that after we finish, because they use like a similar fundamental principle.
Mm-hmm.
They're all kind of cool, but they're just janky in comparison. I mean, it's
I imagine.
they're the same thing. How these satellites getting to your receiver can determine your location based on time. They're constantly sending out a thing called a pseudo-random code, which is essentially just a randomized sequence of zeros and ones. And your receiver has the same code all the time because it's what's being sent by the satellites. And what happens is your receiver knows how long it's been sent the code. The code comes in from each different satellite. And depending on where it's at in the code, by the time it gets to you, you know how long it took the code to get there, right? So you can determine where these satellites are, and that's vice versa, because radio waves travel at the speed of light. So all you do is you take the length of delay between the pseudo-random code coming and going, you multiply that by the speed of light, and you know how long the signal traveled. So you do that with 4 different satellites, match them all together, and it knows where you are because of how long it took you to get to each one, or how long they each took to get to you.
Interesting.
I just think it's kind of funny. It's constantly matching this little code.
Yeah.
And so that's also how it can tell what time it is, because it matches between the 4 or 5 and most of the time 9.
Right.
So there's like no room for error. knows exactly where you are and what time it is.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
So, I think GPS was kind of first made publicly available in the 80s, or we were like aware of it.
Yeah, it was, for a long time, there were only a handful of satellites up there.
Yeah.
So they could position you, but you had to be aware of where they were.
Mm-hmm.
So they were used for operations. So we were going to be in an area, so we would have the satellites over it, can locate you. It wasn't until like 94 that we had all of the satellites up and running. And now we have more. That was when we had, I think, like 24 of them up.
Yeah.
And now we've just been,
Just bonus rounds.
Yeah.
And then by 1996, Bill Clinton kind of opened them up to civilian use. So from the 80s, they were like operational. 90s, we had enough up there, or it was like operationally proven, and there was some application. By 94, there's enough up there to have 24, like the full network. And then by 96, it was kind of fair game. But it wasn't really, was it 90, I think like 98, 99 that it really kind of became feasible for most of the population to...
Yeah, when was the first GPS navigation system sold on the market?
Would have been the early 90s.
Yeah.
Early 90s?
Yeah. So they were available publicly during the Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
But because it was a military thing, they would do, what is it called? It was called selective availability.
Yeah.
Which is where the military was able to get full access to GPS, but as a civilian, they would severely limit its ability to locate you.
Yeah.
So you could still know where you were and use it, but it would be within like 300 feet instead of 5.
Right.
But during the Gulf War, there wasn't enough military GPS units to go around. So a lot of the soldiers, or was it Desert Storm? That's the Gulf War, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There wasn't enough of these to go around, so they had to use civilian models, civilian receivers. And so they shut down the selective availability during that war. Because we just had soldiers running around that were 300 feet off. Couldn't get around. And then it wasn't until May 1st of 2000 that we got rid of selective availability, and now it's for everybody. So the units have been around a little bit before, but it wasn't really good enough to be used practically for a lot of things, especially things like a Yelp, or like what we see it used for now, or a lot of these apps that are super helpful for us.
Yeah.
So that wasn't until 2000, and that's when it would have started to boom as a real civilian product.
Yeah, I remember using GPS 10, 11 years ago, and it would be close, but if I was looking at where I was, I'm looking around, and the dot is like a couple blocks over or something. And now I can walk along the street and watch my dot follow me.
Like right with you.
Yeah.
You can even do it on the bus too, like driving.
Yeah.
It'll follow you. It's great.
Yeah, I think the first kind of civilian models, they were accurate. It was like 30 feet, 45 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That's not like this is like late 90s, early 2000s. That's what we're doing. But I think the current version is good to like within 4 or 5 feet, and then they're phasing into grade 3 or whatever.
And GPS 3
generation. Yeah, GPS 3. I think that's basically going to be, they said, to arm's length.
Oh,
so if you are just holding
nuts.
something out,
No.
they didn't say whose arm. So. A friend of mine he was in the military, and he was saying that the big GPS is a big, obviously still a big thing for the military, and using cell phone signals and then matching that with GPS. He said, we know exactly, we know like which pocket it's in.
That's crazy. Yeah.
The cell phone tower assistance, that's called AGPS, isn't it? Did you
I don't know anything about
at all? Assisted GPS? I remember that being a thing several years ago.
So I know they receive GPS signals for time.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're stationary, so they don't really need... They still get a GPS code just for the atomic clock side of it.
Right.
But I don't know what it's called.
I think as far as like cell phone navigation, I think it uses both.
So this is like the tower is utilizing?
I think so.
That would make sense.
GPS is extensively used with GPS-capable cellular phones as its development was accelerated by the FCC's 9/11 requirement to make cell phone location data available to emergency call dispatchers.
That makes sense. So that way it always knows where you are too. Not just your device, but the carrier.
Yeah.
They can have a track of where you've been. I mean, that's smart, but it's scary.
Yeah, right.
Just a little bit more freedom
Yeah.
taken away.
Slowly.
But all for safety, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember voting on that.
So
Yeah.
standalone GPS units depend solely on radio indicators from satellites. AGPS develops that by likewise using cell tower data to enhance unwavering quality and precision when in poor satellite signal conditions.
That makes sense to me. The satellite
If it's
tower
getting-
and stationary, that location can be more precise, and then it's just an added thing that's connected to your cell phone.
Well, it kind of ties into how we got GPS to become open for civilian use in the first place. It's kind of for a tragedy, but it has to do with the poor navigation error and how that could have been avoided if
Right.
it was. There was a Korean airliner that entered Soviet airspace.
Yeah, in
This is-
83.
83, and was shot down. Like almost 300 people on board.
Yeah,
Oh,
they-
wow.
270,
270, 280.
all died.
This was it's a 747. I think that kind of when 747s were still a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Ronald Reagan ordered the military to make the GPS available for civilian use, but once it was completed. So it was still up there and in, kind of a beta stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird how many flights have been lost since then.
Yeah.
Right.
No kidding.
Doesn't make a lot of sense. Although it's kind of interesting just because you don't think about sort of the consequence of a thing as widespread and well known to us, like GPS, as being owned by the country that we live in.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't think about that before. I mean, I like some inkling or assumption that it was a military thing, but at this point it's so widespread to us, like it's in our pockets all the time. But there's definitely a lot of implications for the fact that it's our government who has it.
Yeah.
And so you stay on our good graces and you can use our stuff. You know, you get to play with our toys.
Yeah.
So like Russia has their own.
Yep.
And what is that one called?
GLONASS.
Yeah, GLONASS.
Global-
They didn't even get theirs up and running though until like 2000. So by the
Yeah.
time ours became good to go for our public, they had finally gotten all their satellites up there.
Yeah, and you can actually buy. I know Garmin sells some GPS receivers that pick up GLONASS signals as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you,
There's even more redundancy.
yeah, it's
there.
way more redundancy, and kind of regardless of where you're on the planet, whatever's the strongest thing, I think it just adds a lot.
So it's
more.
a separate system solely based on their own satellites.
It's the same.
Yes,
Same
they
principle.
don't want to be relying on our military to tell
Yeah.
them where they are.
Yeah,
That's a huge disadvantage.
Sure.
China's working on one. Europe's making one right now called Galileo, which should be up pretty soon.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
China has one. The Baidu, or is that India? I
Yeah,
forget.
Baidu.
No, Baidu is the People's Republic of China's regional system. So it's just, I don't think they have a lot of satellites. It's just like Asia.
Yeah.
And then Compass is their national.
So we came up with the idea for GPS in the 60s, right? When we started doing satellites, the space race. But as we talked about earlier, these things are incredibly expensive, right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about a network of 30 of them, and somebody to monitor it all the time or whatever. It was just deemed pretty much unreasonable, even though it was theoretically possible. And it wasn't until the Cold War that the Congress approved the spending of an estimated $5 billion to get this thing up and running. About $5 billion.
Wow.
And that's not adjusted for inflation at all.
Right. Oh, man. Think about that.
Yeah, so it took the Cold War to get us GPS.
You could probably say that about a lot of things.
Oh, I'm sure.
A lot of technology we use today.
Now, do you know much about Lauren? I know you're interested. Wanted to hear about this earlier.
No.
Yes, I do.
No, I can't talk for too long about it because
I mean,
it was a
like,
little
how
bit
the
more
hell-
complicated to me. But it's essentially the same idea, but done from the ground and with much less accuracy.
Mhm.
So it was a radio navigation system. They were really, really expensive. These things were around like during World War II when they showed up. They provide range for about 1,500 miles away with an accuracy within the tens of miles. So you could kind of know where you were at.
You can
but-
find a country.
Exactly. We know you're roughly in this area, but
Yeah.
really, I don't know where. So You're talking about trying to get air support into an area. And sure, I can send a frequency from far away and let you know, like, this is roughly where we are. That's a big diameter. When was this? Like World War II.
Okay.
That's when they were using this. So it essentially calculated the time difference between two radio pulses that were being sent out, right? So a receiver and the sender are both sending out the same frequency, and it's sort of judging where you are based on how long it took both of these
only based off two
to get there. So it says consider two radio transmitters located at a distance of 300 kilometers from each other. Radio signal will take 1 millisecond to reach the other. One of these stations is equipped with an electronic clock, which we now know is totally inaccurate, that periodically sends out a trigger signal when the signal is sent. The station or the master sends out its transmission. A millisecond later, that signal arrives at the second station. The slave, the station is equipped with a receiver, and when it sees the signal from the master arrive, it triggers its own transmitter. This ensures that the master and slave send out signals precisely 1 millisecond apart. Receiver listening for these signals and displaying them on an oscilloscope will see a series of blips on the display. By measuring the distance between them, the delay between the two signals can be calculated. So you have these two things, and then you have something that's blipping. It's like you're getting these millisecond signals, right? And then you can discover the difference in the distance to the two stations is a certain amount of distance, but where you are in this great circle of where those are coming from of about 1,500 miles. I mean, you know, I guess, where the two stations are, but it only kind of tells you how far away you've gotten. And not where.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'm looking at this as well right now, and it seems like it fits perfectly if you are like a carrier strike group in the Pacific.
Right.
And you gotta get a little bit more accurate to get to where you're going. But if you are a hiker lost, then it's of no use to you. So this was like the first stab at electronic positioning.
You gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, what do you think we were doing before that? We just had maps?
Guessing.
Yeah, that was all based on what somebody drew.
Stupid maps.
Hunches.
I just assume.
Yeah. That way.
Yeah.
So what else we got?
What I was hoping we could do is, did you all look into some GPS mishaps that have happened over time? Where people just get led the completely wrong way?
Just got wrong information sent to them?
Yeah, a lot of people will be driving, they're listening to their navigation system, tell them where to go. Mm-hmm. In 50 feet, turn left here, yada, yada, yada.
And then, of course, there's nothing there.
Sometimes they'll drive right into, like, a lake just because...
That was on The Office. Come on.
No, that's happened a lot.
Oh, man.
It's fun. I mean, that's
why you also have to look around you and not just rely on the sentient voice of...
if you say so.
Mm-hmm. I can actually speak from personal experience. When I was on tour, we would be in some small towns in the middle of nowhere, and we'd put in the address. One or more people would have their iPhones out, and we ended up on a dirt road, and we're looking for like a big theater, not something that would be on a dirt road.
Yeah,
not your uncle's house.
Not some
I don't know if you guys have uncles that just live out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, he's out there with his bees selling honey. No, we'd end up on these dirt roads, and actually stopped a car to ask for directions at one point.
GPS is failing me. Just got to go back to good old fashioned.
We triple checked the address and all that stuff. We ended up just in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
How long ago was that?
2-3 years.
Really?
Yeah. Recent.
Wow. So just the other day, I went and visited my sister came up with my niece and nephew. Went to the Children's Museum, so I went with them. It was awesome. I don't know if you've ever been to the Children's Museum.
I have been.
It's so cool. Anyway, they come up. She's not from around here. She's been here plenty of times, but we're going downtown to go eat at a restaurant. It's fairly close by to where we are. It's a little hop, skip, and a jump kind of thing, but she doesn't need directions.
I'm sorry.
You like hop, skip, and a jump?
No. The headline of this is, my GPS almost killed me.
Found a good website.
Yeah, I'll look at this while you're telling this great story.
Yeah, so my sister's up here. She doesn't live here. We're taking 3 cars to get to this place for lunch, giving directions, whatever. And she's like, no, I just got it right here. And GPS. She's smart. Gets in the car all by herself. We've already taken off. Starts looking at it. Realizes the thing tells her it's about a 45-hour drive.
That's across the country.
You've driven across the country.
I have.
about 45 hours.
Yeah.
And she's like, what? She looks at it, she put the address in, right?
Is she currently driving across the country?
The GPS, she's up by the zoo.
Yeah.
The GPS put her somewhere at like the middle of Mexico and has a perfect driving route to get to
it's
a
gonna get you there.
restaurant in Portland.
It's going to get you there.
Like the direct route from the middle of the Yucatan. So it's like the totally opposite thing happens. It didn't lead you the wrong way. It just, for some reason, how is it getting that code? You want to think, and it had it for several minutes.
Did it then switch?
Yeah. But it just thought she was in Mexico.
That's got to be, some weird...
Yeah, just a little glitch in the code. It like one of the receiver codes was wrong or something. I mean...
That has some implications.
Mm-hmm. That's a big jump.
That
isn't off by a couple states.
Well, and you want to know, I'm thinking also, it's good that it was a very obviously big jump. Mm-hmm. Like you said, she's been here a few times, doesn't necessarily know her way around. If it had been a few miles different, one way or the other, she could have gotten really lost.
Mm-hmm. Like, and then you're lost looking at it on the road.
Assuming that it's right.
Yeah.
If it put her...
Trying to figure out what is even going on.
Yeah, if it said like, the restaurant's in the suburbs or something, when it wasn't, and she wouldn't know. Mm-hmm. I mean, with Mexico, it's pretty obvious. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm not in Mexico.
Yeah. That was odd. I've never had it just be totally off like that and the wrong way. Not get the address wrong that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll notice on my phone that even my computer sometimes, where the last place I logged into Maps was, the computer hasn't caught up, or like my phone hasn't caught up. Also, I'm on my aunt's family plan on the phone, so sometimes it puts me on the East Coast. And then I kind of, as I close it, open it again, it's like, oh no, I'm sorry.
Just kidding.
I'm hammered. I don't know.
I confuse you for your brother.
Yeah. Are you not your brother?
My mistake.
I don't know. That's kind of interesting though. On like the scale of things, you enter military applications. I really hope they don't have that same kind of error.
Right.
Because GPS is used to track ground targets.
Uh-huh.
It's got to be right.
It's got to be.
It just has to be right.
So I was just reading this and I had like a deja vu moment. I feel like maybe we were talking to somebody about GPS before and they cited this story. In March 2012, 3 Japanese tourists in Australia mapped out their path to North Stradbroke Island on their GPS system, but the 9 miles of water and mud between the island and the mainland were left out. So as their GPS guided them into thick mud, the travelers tried to get back onto the road but had to abandon their car because of the rising tide. It told us we could drive down there, Yuzo Noda told Bayside Bulletin. It kept saying it would navigate us to a road.
I mean, just look out of your car.
The window.
Look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
There might be like times of day when that's okay to do. Relying on a system like that as if it's 100% accurate it's foolish, really, because it knows where you are and it knows where the thing that you're trying to get to is, and it has routes in between them, but it has absolutely no idea what any of that is.
Yeah, it's just
not
time.
A sentient machine.
It's just time.
It has no idea what a road is.
Yeah.
What's the difference between...
Yeah, no, there must be GPS receivers in like locate or some way for trilateration to exist within a city for GPS satellites to pick up where you're going to find an address.
Also, I think it's mixed with like Google Maps and other companies' work to get
everything.
Yeah.
Because
GPS only tells you
time.
Location.
Location.
Time and location. Yeah, so it can get you to this address, but then you couldn't put an address into a GPS and have it tell you where that is.
Yeah.
Unless somebody's done that work for you.
I have a couple more little stories here.
What's the headline for this website again? How my GPS almost killed me?
My GPS almost killed me. And there's a few little stories here.
I'm gonna look at it.
And I know that there's even more stupid ones out there, but this is what I first found. Last January, a Georgia man shot and killed a young man approaching his house because, he claimed, he feared a home invasion. The victim's friend said he was trying to pick up a pal to go skating, and his GPS device took him to the wrong driveway.
No.
The friend said the homeowner fired a warning shot when he saw the group approaching the house, and then shot at the car when it moved in his direction. The kid was hit in the head and later died. The man had been charged with murder and is awaiting trial pending the completion of the district attorney's investigation. And this was almost 2 years ago, so it's probably a virgin, that one.
Ugh, a group of kids.
Yeah, they're just trying to hang out and go skating.
Put the gun away. Use your words.
Yeah.
Assess
Even
the
if
situation.
Trespassing.
Even if your words are, I have a gun, it's better than using the gun.
I have a GPS.
Yeah.
In 2009, a Swedish couple on vacation found themselves more than 400 miles off track when they
That's a lot.
misspelled the name of their travel destination into the car's GPS.
Okay, well that's they
It's
misspelled
an
it.
honest mistake, but they're also kind of stupid.
After about 100 miles, you might.
Yeah, when do you step in?
Planning to visit the famed resort island of Capri on the Mediterranean coast, they typed in Carpi and calmly followed the directions to an industrial town in northern Italy. A local tourism official
Said, "Oh my God, how'd you find us?"
Well, he said, Capri is an island. They did not even wonder why they didn't cross any bridge or take any boat.
Wow.
They drove 400 miles.
Hell of a vacation.
Just they must be taking us in the right direction here. We'll get there eventually.
How long does it take to drive 400 miles?
7
Several
hours.
Did no research beforehand, even what direction the island was. Oh, we can just put it in
See,
this.
That's
You
a
know,
whole day.
We take it for granted.
With stops, breaks, and everything. That's a whole day.
GPS is great, but you gotta use your common sense.
Yeah. Use the GPS that you were born with. Talking about the gray matter
Right up there,
The
between
old-
your ears.
between the ears.
I'm going to tell you guys, I had a lot of fun this week.
I had fun too.
Just visualizing satellites.
I think that the time aspect of this, no idea.
No.
Yeah, I did not factor that in at all.
If you,
I knew that the
yeah.
time that I saw on my phone was based on that. I didn't know how intricate it was into the entire thing.
In fact, I think my perception of how GPS works is like a map that the satellite is kind of looking at, and then your phone is sending a signal or emitting a signal,
Mhm.
and it's finding you on
Right.
this map. But
No.
the aspect of time being involved, like tracking distance, that never would have occurred to me.
Yeah, asked to explain it prior to doing this, I would have been so wrong. But I would have probably, just straight up bullshitted my way through some kind of answer about a signal being sent to something that's keeping track of a radius,
Yeah.
or something. I always thought I was being watched, or like I'm being tracked.
Yeah.
But no, I'm
Tracking signals. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm driving into lakes.
See, that's just so funny because they're blaming the GPS.
You drove into a lake.
Yeah.
You don't blame the GPS. It's a map system that's a visual representation of the GPS's system.
It's very accurate, but it can't tell you.
It doesn't know what's in front of you. It's
Everything.
not.
GPS is literally just looking at its watch.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's all it's doing. It's not.
you're here now. Oh, you're here now.
It's not looking around at where you are. It's just looking at its watch and saying, "Oh, you must be."
Well, it's important to keep in mind with that too. It's not tracking you.
Yeah,
You're tracking it.
you are the machine.
Is there anything that we
I don't know.
didn't cover?
This is a pretty cut and dry,
Pretty cut and dry. Yeah.
open book sort of subject.
There's plenty just beyond the basic understanding that is very interesting and cool.
Pretty in depth. Cesium was.
That was a fun one.
Yeah.
What a weird. It's a liquid metal
And it is the standard for time.
for time.
We just decided that's a second. It's another second.
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 Second. Second. I like having a pretty basic understanding of how it works now, too, especially because this whole time it's been floating in my head and it's been totally wrong. I just never even thought about it.
Yeah.
If my
No
GPS
idea.
ever puts me in the middle of Mexico, someone's atomic clock.
Oh, I'm calling the Air Force.
Yeah.
Oh.
The Navy.
Oh, the Navy. Yeah. God.
Well, call the Air Force too. They might know
Yeah.
somebody.
I mean, they're involved.
Yeah. They're all in bed together.
What is it? It's the 50th. Oh, I guess it is the Air Force that now operates it. The 50th Space Wing of the United States Air Force.
Ah.
Check that out.
I'm getting,
He was right.
I'm getting inconsistent information here.
Yeah.
It's all Obama.
It's all Obama.
I just really like that we can point to Bill Clinton and thank him for.
Yeah, really. And Al Gore also for the upgrades, the expansion of the program.
Yeah, I feel like that wasn't a big deal when it happened.
It is now.
Didn't
No, I
seem
didn't.
like it.
Yeah. A lot to thank, Bill.
Well,
There you go.
GPS.
know where you're going.
I'm Martin Wallace.
I'm Darren McCarthy.
I'm Dan Fury.